we will be working on a couple more pages for a book I'm working on called Myles Maarav's Pursuit of Happiness, featuring my mouseman character, Myles Maarav. And this is for those who are new to my streams. The idea here is it's a bit of an alphabetical thing, doing a couple pages per letter. We are on X today, so we've got Myles with a pair of X-ray specs, and then Myles whacking on a xylophone. So after today, we've got two more nights, and then I will sort of put this aside and write a bunch of short stories. And then once I have the short stories, we'll come back to it and see if I need any additional illustrations. So, and what I'm doing, because I'm using a dip pen with liquid India, very liquid ink, India ink, I like to start from the top left and work my way across. Trying to remember when we last had this big of a portrait of Myles. I think it's been a while. But usually the way I end up picking words is I'll kind of look through and actually a little dictionary I've got, pick stuff up. But of course, for X, there's not a lot of options, right? At first X-ray, I was like, what, like broken bones or whatnot? And then I remembered X-ray specs. So thought that would be fun. I'm using a fairly narrow nib right now. Because Myles is a brunette, I will come back at the end and kind of darken in, but having this kind of line worky sort of vibe as a base means that then the highlights will still have stranding showing in them. So that's what we're going to do. And the underdrawing on here is a non-photo blue pencil. Basically, any very pale blue pencil crayon will work if you're pretty light in the application on it. And the idea is then when you scan in black and white, the blue drawing vanishes and just leaves the black lines. Now, for this one I think is going to have about a 30% reduction. I think traditionally the comics guys, like back in the day, and even newspapers, but definitely like superhero comics and whatnot, you normally would draw things about 4 times the size, so twice as wide and twice as tall. But then you need a big scanner for that. I don't have a giant scanner. Hey, Edie, welcome to the show, and hello, let's test it as well. Welcome. That's like I was saying with the reduction, you would normally try and have like about a double, because when you have the more reduction you have, the tighter drawing looks at its finished size. I am working with the standard scanner, which is less than ideal, but I will be probably scanning these at like 1200 DPI. So kind of makes it like 4 times reduction in terms of the pixel size. But yeah, it's not as perfect as when you scan with the really big scanners, but such is life. Anyways, so we're working on Myles's little pompadour. Myles is a big Elvis fan, so he has the kind of poofed up bangs or whatever, front part of his hair. It does make it a little odd when you scale these drawings up. I may come in with a really fine, like a crow quill nib afterwards, and put some shading in there as well. By the time I get around to that, most of this will have dried, so I won't have to worry too much about potentially smudging. It's always a little strange I find, because I usually draw Myles with his head about like the size of a quarter, so doing the really big version is always a little like, whoa. I have to actually, like, strand in his eyebrows instead of just do a single line. But anyways, for research for this stream, I actually, uh, saw a few videos and was reading about the X-ray specs. So I guess what they used to do is, I think there were a couple ways that the effect would happen, but basically made you have double vision. So when you held your hand up to light or whatnot, the middle part would be darker, and then you know you kind of get this split off version, which would make it look like you had a glow. As anyways, so they'd have this little hole in the glasses, which we'll kind of put in here, but they would often by using India ink, yes, I am using India ink. I'm specifically using a brand called Demco. For years, I used the Speedball Super Black, and I still have some of it, but I don't know if they changed the formulation or what. But the last few bottles of the Speedball, I haven't been happy with. Maybe it's just random that there was a questionable batch, but yeah, I switched to the Demco about uh, 3 months ago, 3 months ago, and I've quite liked it. One of the problems I sometimes would run in, and it might eventually happen with the Demco as well, but one of the common issues I would run into with Speedball Super Black is a new bottle would be really runny. Sometimes would actually come out kind of charcoal looking instead, like a gray, not black, even after like shaking up the bottle and whatnot. And then halfway through the bottle, I guess some of the excess water would evaporate out and it would be great. And then by the time you got 2/3 of the way through, then it was kind of gummy. Um, so far I haven't had that happen with the Demco. I'm not saying it won't, but maybe I'm using enough of it now that it doesn't that I go through it frequently enough. I don't know. But yeah, it's India ink, and then I do also, I mean, not for this project, but I do have some colored acrylic inks and stuff that I'll also sometimes use. Um, Actually, at one point, I was kind of debating whether I was going to end up with, like when I was unhappy with the Speedball Super Black, I was kind of going like, oh, maybe I'll just use some of my black acrylic ink. But the thing is, if I'm drawing, and what I have is I got my ink in like a shot glass. So if I had that out for a 2-hour stream with acrylic ink, like it would definitely start drying and gumming up. Whereas the India ink, I don't run into that yet. Now I'm sure if I was drawing all day, then I probably would. Yeah, some extra vigorous shaking. Like I was doing that, but and that's why I kind of go like I don't know if the speedball, if they just had like bad batch or something, and then uh, if I'm buying stuff at Michael's, I don't know how much of that they actually move. Where maybe I was just getting a few bad bottles, but I mean, it definitely seemed different than previous bottles. And it was like over the course of about 3 or 4 bottles where I was really unhappy with it. Where I was like, I don't know, I think maybe it's different than it was 15 years ago or whatnot. I could be wrong though. Um, because I mean, I've been doing dip pen and India ink work off and on for about 25 years, I guess. But there was definitely a period in the middle where I wasn't. So whether they changed the formulation or I don't know, right? Um, so, but I stumbled on this other brand and so far so good. Cue to me, fast forward to a year from now when I'm complaining about the same brand that I'm now praising. But so far so good. I realized on the weekend when I was rewatching a little bit of my Friday stream that I think when I'm actually like kind of really scribbling with the pen that actually picks up in my lav mic, which is kind of hilarious. It's kind of going like that. The sound effects don't happen, and then I'm watching going, and I'm hearing. I'm like, oh, okay. So I think I forgot to finish my thought about the X-ray specs. So they had basically a couple layers of like cellulose or whatever film type plastic. And then they'd either have like etched lines in it, or they'd like stick a bit of a feather, and then the little fibers of the feather would basically break up the image, and that's what created the optical illusion. It was kind of interesting. And then, of course, marketing. It was funny to see how many of the ads from the old comic books, they were actually pretty clever, because they would say, apparently, you could apparently see through things, So technically speaking, they weren't lying, but they definitely didn't work the way that they were advertised, or the way that you were led to believe that they would work. I think Miles being in his late 20s, you know, by this point in his life, I don't think he'd be using X-ray specs to actually try and see boobies or anything, because presumably he has seen those. But I was actually thinking earlier, what would the story with these be? And I think the story would be that he's going through some stuff in at his dad's place, like some of his old comics and whatnot. He finds this pair of X-ray specs, and then he remembers how mad he was when he was like 12 and discovered that he got ripped off. We'll see. Usually tend to be pretty light on the outlines and whatnot, but I feel like he needs a little bit of a line on the side of his nose. And of course, he's not happy with this. Common expression for Miles, kind of a sourpuss. Of course, we gotta add his hairdo over here as well. Did give my nibs a thorough, a whole afternoon in the ultrasonic cleaner on the weekend. So this one's definitely drawing better than it was last week. It just goes to show, apparently I should do that every Saturday, I guess. Whatever. At least the ones I use the most often. I do have some where I don't tend to use them, but or they're backups or whatever. And now for Miles's whiskers. Let's try and get the whisker in one smooth go. Sometimes it doesn't work out though. Like there. Or there. Funny, sometimes drawing on this scale ends up being like a super quick drawing, and sometimes it ends up taking a lot longer. Um, Although we will be going over things with a fatter nib, so now in his jacket, I'm not going to do the same trick of using the thinner nib to do like this sort of thing and then going over because I want this to have more of almost like a velvety texture. So we are going to switch nibs and start applying. Actually, I think what I might do is use a brush, but I do at least want to kind of get in the corners with the nib because it's a little more controllable versus, well, I'm using cheap brushes, so that don't hold a point. So want to kind of get away from the corners as much as possible before going in with those. The nice thing with the brush is it will tend to spread things out for a very flat or fairly flat black once all is said and done and dried. Sometimes the brush can almost give an effect that's similar to like when you're using the calligraphy ink, like the Sumi ink. But we have Miles in his characteristic shawl-collared, kind of like a tuxedo jacket that he likes to wear, and he pairs it with a t-shirt. Very 1980s kind of vibe. If they had Miami Vice in syndication when Miles was growing up, then that's probably one of his fashion inspirations. But he also probably wouldn't really admit to that. So, and because this is putting in fairly, I mean, it's not super thick, but it is going to be wet. So, probably actually flip Miles upside down in order to continue on with his hair and his ears. There we go. Now let's grab that fat nib again. Not too many of the drawings I've done for this book so far were this zoomed in on Miles. Um, I think the next closest would probably be the one where it's a two-page illustration, like a spread. And on the one side, he's in the dentist chair, getting his teeth cleaned, but he's imagining himself driving on a mountain road. But I think even there, his head is more like this because you see, like, um, the hygienists, when they sit behind your head and they're like reaching into with the tools or whatnot. So I think this is the biggest um, drawing of Miles. And the reason why I'm not continuing all the way is that's actually going to be the edge of the page. So, you know, it would just be wasted ink basically to go all the way over. So now let's kind of put in some more dark areas on his hair. He doesn't actually have black hair. It's dark brown, but same thing as far as a black and white medium is concerned. The paper I'm working on is a supposedly smooth Bristol board. Well, I'm on the whole they don't make it the way they used to make it kick. Actually, I have some Bristol board, it was from like 15 years ago. Because on my Wednesday streams when I work on Zelda the Destroyer in 2013, I had started a reboot of that comic, which originally I did in, the MySpace era from 2006 to 2009. And I had drawn this reboot in 2013, but I never inked it or finished it. So I actually inked it on my Wednesday streams earlier this year. And that's also on Smooth Bristol board, but it is very different. Like that one almost has, I wouldn't go so far as to say like a glass like, but it's way smoother even than this. Um, there you go. Also makes him look like he's wearing headphones, but he's oh hi, hey Maxim, welcome back. Okay, yeah, no worries. End of the season, time to play around, right? And hello, of course. Miles here is well, I don't know about testing out, but he has found a pair of X-ray specs that perhaps he had at a younger age, and he's not too impressed with them. They're not actually working as described. A bit of splatter off of the pen here. So we're getting a little bit of the highlight as the hair goes over. I just have to remember that it's going to be darker further back because he is flipped upside down. Actually looking, I think I sort of dry enough to try and do this right side up without smudging too badly. I sort of sometimes do to keep my hands stable is, well, put my fingers on a couple of dry spots and brace myself up. Getting the hair shine in is kind of, it's definitely a trust the process sort of thing because it's gonna always look a little weird until it's all in. You also want some areas like that are completely blacked out going back because then that implies more stranding, or I guess chunking would be a better way to look at it. Definitely with a hairstyle like this, like it's a good one to use reference pics for, anyone who's got his hair kind of slicked back, but a little bit in a pompadour as well, because that'll help kind of show where, you know, which, where do you tend to have more lights and darks in the chunking and whatnot. So Miles's original origin story actually comes from a project I was working on where I was like doing drawings of Bono from U2 as a mouse, and then he mutated. But if you think of Bono's kind of poofed back hair, uh, all that practice did kind of end up being beneficial for drawing Miles. Although here, that's looking a little too helmety. Um, So now I started with a very fine pen and then I went to a fatter one to put in shadow. And now we're going to go back to a fine one to put some like random hairs just a little bit out of whack because otherwise it looks like he's wearing headphones. So, you know, I think you want just a little bit. You don't want to do so much that looks like a shaggy dog, but just that little even. Everybody ends up have everyone has those like little teeny, unless you're totally bald, I guess. But, if you have any hair, you usually have the weird little short hair, baby hairs around that don't really comply. Um, my hair is fairly long. I still have some of these weird little, like 1.5 inch long hairs at my hairline. It's easy to overdo that, though, for sure. Uh, kind of a little bit of a just makes them look a little bit ragged, which kind of works. Um, just thinking with the X-ray specs, they're usually pretty uniform black, but I'm debating, do I want to use the brush and completely fix those? Maybe I do. So X-ray glasses, yeah. Yep, he got ripped off. Although, as I'm kind of envisioning the story, I'm thinking of it, it will end up being not that he's just bought them because, he's old enough to know better now, but he's going through some of his stuff from his childhood or early teen years. He finds these and he gets himself pissed off all over again, remembering how he lost his allowance on these stupid things. think at one point these things used to actually be made up, entirely of plastic, and then they realized, hey, we can actually be even lower quality. Let's make them out of paper. I was trying to put the holes in with a little bit of texture, but I think that you're going to look more proper if they actually are like the black dots. Always, after everything's dry, go in with a little bit of white gouache to put a tiny highlight to make it look shiny. Well, first bit of ink on my hand today. Yeah, probably won't be the last. I'm kind of thinking about adding a little bit of shading to him, especially in his ears. He's got the big round mouse ears. Well, mouse slash rat. Miles's backstory is that his mother is a rat and his dad is a mouse. And he was an accident. One, okay, I've got one of these crow quill pens that kind of works and one that doesn't. This may be that doesn't work. But anyways, the story goes that one St. Patrick's Day, his mother did a little drinking and driving and not reading a map properly and found herself in Moston instead of Ratsville. And his dad, Larry, decided he was up for a challenge. And, 9 months later, along comes Miles. But he's actually raised by his dad. And, because in this world, well, I mean, even in the real world, rats are not nice to mice. Rats actually eat mice. Now, we have anthropomorphic characters. I figured that was a little too horror. This is a comedy comic type of thing instead. But I do have that the rats are thugs and bullies. So Miles was raised by his dad in Moston because then, he's in between the sizes of a rat and a mouse. Miles could be the bully instead of being bullied. So, but as an adult, he moved to Ratsville to pursue uh, having his own accounting firm and economic opportunities and all that sort of stuff. But the two towns are supposed to be an hour's drive away, so Miles is kind of back and forth between the two. So there we've got just a little bit of shading in his ears, and that will give just the sense that they're a little bit hollow, which also makes me kind of go, see how much this crow quill pen wants to play nice. You can add a little bit of shadow with super fine lines elsewhere. Now, will these necessarily show up when it's scanned and printed? I don't know. But if they don't, of course, there's always the option of just clearing them out in Photoshop. So, hi, Luna. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. We've got Miles finding his old pair of X-ray specs and being pissed off anew about the fact that they don't actually work. It's fun with these crow quills to sort of see where it decides it will actually lay down the ink because it usually isn't all the way along. Glad to hear you're doing good, Luna. I'm doing pretty well. Spent the day running some errands and, boring type of stuff like that. I also was doing a bunch of actually pen and paper tests for a coloring book project because with the one I'm working on the Thursday streams, the Noah's Archipelago, I've been doing that on smooth Bristol board, but I was thinking, do I really need to do it on Bristol board? So I was testing, I had one like the Strathmore drawing paper, and hey Bean, welcome to the show. Um, anyways, the Strathmore drawing paper, it's fine for this sort of stuff, and it's fine for like markers, but like the fine liners, if you don't want the line to break up, it was looking a little weird. So went and found a couple different kinds of actually just the play like the cheap sketchbook paper, like the Strathmore 400s or the lime green Canson XL. That's just well, that's actually marked as drawing paper, but it's a fine tooth. Anyways, I was testing those today with different fine liners and decided actually the cheapest one is the one that has the smoothest finish and therefore works out kind of the best for what I want it for doing coloring books. Let's give Miles's whiskers some shadow. Came back from your sleepover yesterday. Nice. So you had a few days then. Just realized this expression I'm giving Miles is almost identical to one I have from a painting I did Miles a couple years ago, where he's running for Ratsville City Council, and his slogan is "Corruption you can trust." Although that's kind of him taking a pot shot at the mayor of Ratsville, who is highly corrupt. It was all weekend. It was a fun. That's awesome. I was never that much of one for sleepovers, although when I was a little kid, my elementary school best friend and I did definitely do a lot of sleepovers, um, and kinda tapered off, but they were fun. Just thinking, should I add a deeper line, or is that gonna make Miles look too might make him look a little wizened? Well, now he's got, some shadow on his face. One thing I find with the crow quills is they do start to kinda shred the top layer. Corruption you can trust New York City's government, I think most places' government. Definitely a lot of that here in Canada as well. Um, yeah, I mean, it was kind of a spoof of, sometimes you get government officials who are, in bed with the media and whatnot, 'cause, uh it kind of there's a couple different Ricky B. the Rock and Roll Rat, stories where Miles's, quest for getting onto city council, kind of unfolded, and then one of them, like, the mayor is, golf buddies with the editors of all the newspapers, so they're running stories like, "An unnamed source reported that Myles Maarav, candidate for, city council, did use the bathroom at such and such a restaurant, but did not wash his hands afterwards." You know? Uh, and then, like, chicks that, Miles had gone on dates with, reporting that he didn't call them back and all the, like, tabloidy type of things, um, trying to smear him. Of course, the other thing that I had is for the rat world, they all have decided that all politicians are lying. So instead of voting for them based on their promises, which the rats correctly assume will never be fulfilled, the rats just decided to vote for the tallest candidate. So Miles, unfortunately, being half mouse, he is an entire head shorter than any of the rats. So he was never going to win a seat on city council. And the mayor, Al Water Rat, is 6 foot two, so he was always going to win. You know, and Miles was doing a blog exposing that Al Water Rat his owns a paving company, and that paving company got the contract to repave all the roads in Ratsville, and no one else was even allowed to bid on the gig and all that sort of stuff. And anytime this is mentioned to any of the voters in Ratsville, they always say, "Yeah, but Al Water Rat is 6 foot two." So definitely adding a lot more shading to Miles's little face than I normally do in pen and ink. And the main character, Ricky, his mother is almost a religious fervor for believing whatever the Ratsville Star Sentinel says. So, he's telling Ricky he shouldn't hang around Miles because Miles is backed by big money interest from Mouston, you know, trying to take over the Rat City. Kind of a bit of a pout. It's kind of a point with pen and ink where you kind of go like, am I doing too much or not enough? But I think I'm still at the point of not enough. Still getting the hang of the crow quills because, for generally speaking, these really fine nibs, it's only recently that I've even been able to get them to kind of lay down any ink and not just shred my paper. So, still getting the hang of these. Usually, like this one is usually the smallest nib that I use. I guess Miles has a birthmark there. Pen decided to barf out just a tiny little speck of black ink. Miles has kind of a bit of a fat face, as Ricky points out at times, because Ricky's usually the narrator of the stories involving these two. Ricky says, "Well, put it this way, Miles don't skip dessert. He don't skip seconds neither." Neither does Ricky, but Ricky's uh, got a different kind of a metabolism, I guess. He gets away with it still. I think we are going to leave that drawing of Miles where it is right now because I don't want to go too far with the shading because it kind of can get to a tipping point where it gets more messy looking and you have to make it quite dark. So we're going to move on to the second drawing of the night, and that is Miles beating the snot out of a xylophone. Miles kind of he's got anger issues. So probably a percussion instrument would be kind of therapeutic for him. And of course, because these are the two drawings for X as we work our way through the alphabet, well, that xylophone would be one of the main X words. And also, years ago, I actually for a while, like our big music instrument company in Canada. Well, we've got two big chains. One is Tom Lee, and the other is Long McQuaid. And both of them have like instrument rental programs. And I did for a while. I was renting as like a 3.5 octave xylophone, which I absolutely loved, but didn't really have the space for. And when I moved into this house, so I gave up the rental, but I've often thought, kind of miss having one. I'd have to look up what the monthly rental was. I think it was, I mean, because it's not a common instrument. Um, it was kind of a lot. I think it was probably something like, I want to say like $150 a month, um, which is a lot. Um, at some point, I may Uh, either just keep an eye out and buy a large xylophone, and this is like the rosewood kind, like professional, not the kiddie version, but something I may get again at some point. I mean, not that I play it well at all, but I do uh, actually have a bass clarinet, and I had rented a bass clarinets a couple different times off and on over the years, and then finally decided to bite the bullet. And plus, I found one that was in a pretty good deal on a used one. So I'll keep an eye out for a good used xylophone as well, but, it's not exactly a priority, but anyways, it's funny working on, knowing that I was gonna draw Miles, thwacking a xylophone kind of got me back into the, "Oh, maybe I should get one." I was like, "You have no place to put one and no time to practice one, so no." I do miss it. Actually, what I would really love would be a marimba, but marimbas are massive and very expensive as well. Course, once I start inking Miles, you'll see the way I have drawn him is not he does not have proper xylophone mallet technique. Instead, he's whacking on the thing like it was a taiko drum. But, he probably got cut off in traffic on the way home today, so he needs to unwind by hitting things. So the impetus for this project, is actually there's a YouTuber named Strufless who's a Australian, um, creativity kind of I don't wanna say guru, but, creativity dude who makes videos about creativity and art, and, I think it was 2023, he had came up with this, challenge for his, viewers. It's called the Alphabet Superset. So the idea was, that you would whatever your particular medium was, and, you would pick your own theme, but, then every week, you would kind of the idea would be that you would work your way through the alphabet, and whatever your project was, you would kind of break it into units, and you would do 1 unit based on a sub-theme, um, that, started with that letter of the alphabet. So, I actually did start this book in 2023, I think in the summer or actually might have been the fall, and then it got set aside, and then I didn't pick it up. I think I got through I, mostly in 2023, and maybe 1 in 2024, 1 in 25, and then this year, I decided to start working on it again, um, and that was starting with J, and now we're almost done, at least this phase. So, that definitely looks more like, the mallet you would use to hit a gong, not, usually on this scale, xylophone mallets would be like that. Sometimes about like that, like the yarn covered ones, but, you know, Miles is, Miles doesn't appear to be, doing, too much music. No worries, thanks, for stopping by, Edie, you know, come by anytime, I'm here Monday to Fridays, kind of at the same a little bit later than, Jason streams, but, roughly at the same time, so pop by anytime, see you again soon. Take care. So, And by the way, folks, for anyone not familiar, when I say Jason, I mean Jason, whose channel is called The Inspired Life. And he does like architectural, sort of abstract-y drawings, especially of like New York landmarks and stuff like that on his streams, and loads of bright color, working with like acrylic markers and stuff. So I know Edie from his chat. I don't often get to catch his stuff live, but because of streaming at basically the same time. But it's always fun when I do get to pop in there. So if you're into bright color and architecture, do check his stuff out. So we've got Miles's poofy hairdo again. And his big round ears. I have thought one of these days what I got to do is sit down with some, what you call it, Sculpey, polymer clay, and make a little Miles with the ears, and then do drawings as you turn it around to sort of see him. Because I tend to draw his ears always in the same position, and if he's from the side, then it's almost like they turn back around. So I probably should make a little model of Miles, because this would apply to Ricky as well, of course, of the ears on the head and how they would really look from different angles. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Um, I have done loads of little sculptures of them, but not super accurate because they were done with clay. And I mean, this is obviously definitely not accurate. This is supposed to be Miles's dad, Larry, but that's like made of 3 pinch pots and then adding the sculptural elements. So I mean, that doesn't. The ears are definitely not naturalistic looking. So, and one of the problems with like regular clay, of course, you have to bake it or you have to fire it, which is a pain in the butt because I don't have a kiln. But also, there's limits to how thin you can do it. Whereas like polymer clay, I think it's Cost Clay is the brand that's designed to remain thin and flexible. So I should really get some Cost Clay and use that for the ears. I think you can also adhere it to other like Sculpey or other types of polymer clay as well. So if you're doing like a figure of, say, Batman or whatnot, um, you could make Batman's cape out of Cost Clay and the rest out of Sculpey, and it would all gel together, I think. I used to watch some of Ace of Clay's tutorial videos. We use making little sculptures and whatnot, but I haven't seen them in a while, so need a refresher. Before I do the jackets, I'm gonna put Miles's jaw in because then, obviously the rest is in behind, right? So we have those lines. I will say like getting like clothing, the fall of clothing right is definitely something that I kind of find reference photos a little easier than say you know there's a lot of well, I don't know about a lot, but there's a few references online that are free for artists like Crocus Cafe, Line of Action. There's a third one that the name escapes me, but those are kind of more. They're photos, but they'll be kind of like artist model type nude photos and whatnot. It's like, well, that's actually not helpful because I don't normally draw my characters naked, so whereas, like, something like this, one of the reasons why I kind of briefly alluded to it or mentioned it earlier, but I was doing the project where I was, doing a lot of drawings of Bono, and then kind of mashing them up with Mickey Mouse just for the laughs. But one of the reasons I did that is because, of course, um, there's like a zillion photos of him on stage and, paparazzi shot where he's just, walking around New York or whatever. Um, uh, Posed for, candid, all this sort of stuff. So those sorts of images are really great for seeing like how, if somebody's going around wearing a suit jacket and they're, you know, jogging around on a giant stage, how does that jacket move? And that's not the sort of thing you tend to see in like stock photos or definitely, a lot of the reference photos, you don't really get that. And not just him. I mean, like Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran's another great one. Um, Especially old photos when the Duran Duran guys were doing, the suit jacket and T-shirt thing in the 80s. Be very useful for drawing Miles, and how he dresses, how he looks, etc. Right? Anyways, so gonna have the lining a bit like that. I will go over this in a. I think I should have it. Yeah, that's better because then it kind of loops up like that, and that's why the corner would come further down. And I lost my train of thought, but it doesn't matter. Point is, I'm just kind of rambling about. For anybody who's watching this, is because I know sometimes I'll get people ask in the chat about, oh, how can I get better at X, Y, or Z? It's kind of like, well, see if you can find references for the thing you want to draw in real life. So if you want, short dude wearing a suit jacket and like running around like a maniac, then you want there are certain paparazzi shots or celebrity shots are actually pretty good for that. I mean, obviously, if you're, you know, that's for your own sketchbook or whatnot, and then you get a sense of the anatomy and a sense of the folds and whatnot, and then you draw from memory or imagination. You know, if you're putting a painting for sale, then you shouldn't use a paparazzi shot of Justin Bieber, even if it's not Justin Bieber that your character is. Anyways, it does get a little messy with the idea of pose reference and all that, but I think the rules are going to be, such as they are going to be changing a little bit too because of that case involving the Warhol estate and the photographer and the Prince thing. Although, well, that was also under license that then was used for commercial work. I don't know if it would be different if Warhol had just appropriated that for his paintings, and it all becomes a big mess. But be aware in terms of like references and copyright and all that sort of stuff. Like with this pose, like this was drawn completely out of my imagination, which is why there's some mistakes in it. Like his shoulder actually should be coming down further. But anyways, um, and some of these sorts of things. Another option would be if you have pliable friends and family and the right kind of wardrobe stuff, you could um, get your friends and family to pose for you. I would say though, don't have them do static poses. Those always look off. If it's an action pose like this, what you want to do is film them and then take a still from the video, or use like burst mode, or just have them move and you're just constantly hitting the shutter. and taking a ton of photos and then, see if any of those work out and you can kind of muck around from there. Um, because usually post for, like the example that I always found was, kind of one of my favorite examples would be if you want somebody eating and you want it to look really realistic, how either you have one of your friends eat and actually eat and you film it. Um, that may still look a little unnatural because they know they're being filmed. But what's great actually is celebrity paparazzi, where they don't know they're being filmed because somebody's on the other side of Times Square with a telephoto lens or, or whatever, right? Um, because then they're actually eating. They're not thinking about how do I make it look like I'm eating. Um, anyways, and then you kind of practice drawing from there until you get the correct anatomy kind of ingrained in your brain. Kind of a little bit of a ramble, I guess. But I just realized if his hand's going that way, the mallet. Well, anyways, he's Miles here is not really hitting for musicality. He's hitting for the sake of hitting. So it doesn't really matter that he's not going to actually be hitting correct notes. What he really should have got was just bought himself a taiko drum with that kind of motion. And I did kind of I mean, I like watching random music video I say music videos, I don't mean like MTV music videos, I mean like performances, that get posted on, YouTube. So I've watched a fair amount of, like, taiko drumming and stuff like that, so I kinda knew, it's like, "Oh, this would be, much more fun if Miles is, raising his hands over his head to, like, really bash on the thing," which you really shouldn't do if you actually have a nice, xylophone, but anyways, Miles's pants are kind of suffering a little bit from what I was saying earlier about, sometimes there's awkward in between point of, is this enough, shadow or is it way too much or nowhere near enough? Anyways, so I actually think I'm just gonna make Miles's pants black. Usually if I do like a marker sketch of Miles, his pants are blue. Yeah, possibly navy blue, often charcoal gray, and then the jacket is kind of a purplish black. Like a purple that's so black that's almost or so dark that it's almost black, kind of egg planty kind of shade. Uh, we do need to draw the xylophone, and this is definitely not the most accurate xylophone on the planet. But I'm going to first go over Miles's jacket. So we have some more dark areas like that. That there is kind of a very dark spot. So here. I mean, the other reference, of course, it's the classic, like kind of doing an urban sketching thing. Um, Usually, especially if say you're at, in a mall food court or something like that. Usually, you get away with it. You just kind of you got your snack or whatever, and you're kind of holed up in the corner, and you got your sketchbook in your lap, and you're kind of just sketching. Well, apparently, just staring out into space. Um, Usually, it won't be. bothered by anybody. Some people might wanna see what you're doing. Um, but it depends on your personality if you're like, I mean, myself, when I do that, I try and, kind of zone in on somebody, like, way across the food court, where they're not gonna see me and wanna have a ask questions about my drawing. Other people don't mind that or don't mind having a conversation or whatnot. Um, but it depends on your personality. It depends what you're trying to do. And also, like usually when I do that, I do pretty quick sketches. Actually, I think I've got one in one of my little sketchbooks. I can show you what I mean if it's actually in this one that I'm thinking of. Watch me not be able to find the drawing I'm looking for. Though I'm actually like 3 or 4 pages away from finishing this particular sketchbook. So I'm probably gonna do a sketchbook tour on the weekend and, we'd see it then. Okay, here. No, this is so this is I was at, Hillside, is it called Hillside Mall in Victoria, BC? But I was sitting in like one corner of the food fair and I was drawing people who were like 100 feet away. So there's this girl who was on her phone, and these are super quick sketches. And then this girl was waiting at the A&W to place her order. And she had this like weird, like lean back kind of pose. Um, so those are the kind of sketches I'm talking about, like super, super fast. Although I have seen there's another YouTuber named uh, who goes by Becky's Sketchbooks, and she's actually based out of my hometown, or actually, well, Vancouver in general. I was going to say she's from Richmond, but I don't think she is. I think she's in Surrey, which is the next suburb over, or one of the suburbs very close by. But she does urban sketching, so she will go into a cafe and does like watercolor and pen and watercolor sketches and whatnot. And she's totally cool with if somebody wants to see what she's drawing and whatnot. Actually, there was a video I saw of hers. It's from the last couple months. She went to England on vacation with her mom, and she's drawing in one cafe and did the drawing of this one girl, and then afterwards got chatting with her, and it turned out it was, like, one of her classmates from university, and actually wasn't even in London. This was, like, a day trip going up to Oxford, so it's, like, this little tiny cafe in Oxford, and she just happened to randomly bump into one of her, classmates and slash friends who she'd sort of lost I don't know about lost touch with, but certainly didn't know that this, person was gonna be in Oxford, that she was gonna run into them, so it was kind of a random fun little story that sometimes that happens. Anyways, so here. So we're gonna call Miles himself, we will call done for now. In the background, I'm gonna leave stark white. Um, now, let's see how badly I misdraw xylophone because I did not. I just did a very quick reference image sketch, and the reference image on this wasn't actually somebody playing the xylophone. It was like brought up one from like Long McQuaid's website, and like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna now if I like mentally tilt it from like a top down view, twist it to this way. So it's definitely not going to be super, super accurate. Say that that cuts off there. So usually the sharp, you know, kind of like a piano has the keys for the sharps. Xylophone, they are little bars that sit up on top, but similar to the black keys on a piano. see, okay, so that would be, so that one would be B, would be A, B, G, F. See, I've spaced these too far apart. We're just gonna ignore that. So C, or maybe Miles has been hitting these bars so much that they are now out of place. That could be the case as well. And then, of course, with these, you can actually pull. And what a xylophonist will often do is, because you can just lift out these bars, is say you're playing in a given key and you're not, that there are no B naturals in the piece because everything, if B occurs, it's a B flat, then you may lift out the B naturals so that you don't have to worry about accidentally hitting them. Um, Usually, the better practice is to just get used to being accurate in where you're thwacking your mallets, but you know, not everybody's up to that. Here we have. Yeah, the gap would be a lot closer than this one is definitely incorrect. Uh, C, B, that means that E flat, A flat, F sharp. Phrasing it that way just to annoy people who don't like mixed key signatures, and I'm drawing the wrong number of keys again. Never mind. Miles's xylophone is a little screwed up, we'll just say. So that's 2 octaves. Let's see here. So that would be an F, and that would be. Yeah, I definitely have drawn the gapping incorrectly, but that's okay. I mean, it's not, but it's okay enough for this. Octave, 2 octaves. Let's give him a 3.5 octave one. You would also these would be I mean, these I am drawing a little longer, but the distinction would be way more obvious in a real xylophone because, of course, the longer the bar, the lower the note. Actually, I think somewhere in my hard drive, I have photos of the xylophone that I used to rent. So if I had thought about that, I could have gone in and grabbed a photo and basically traced it on a light box. But at the same time, I kind of, for this stuff, I kind of like to not do that um, because it makes it a little more, unless you're going to do that kind of tracing with all your picks so that it's part of your style. But if mostly you're drawing free-handed, then sometimes the stuff where you don't where you don't freehand it really sticks out like a sore thumb. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. And I will fill in the rest of Miles's legs once I finish the xylophone, because you would see it be in through those gaps, right? But let's actually make this kind of a flat black because they're usually like a textured. Well, for xylophones and marimbas, they usually have like a black tubular, like square tubular steel base. Um, vibra vibraphones, I think they're called, like the ones that have the silvery metal bars. They actually have like a little bit of amplification on them. Um, those are usually like a steel, like a silvery base color. So, you know, the instrument, like the bars, are also a silvery color. we're kind of getting towards, I mean, obviously, I still got to finish Miles's legs, but 'cause otherwise he's just floating in space. But we are getting towards the end of the stream. So this is kind of good time for my boilerplate blathering. So I stream Monday to Friday um, at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and a different project every night. So on Mondays, we've been working on this Miles Marav's Pursuit of Happiness kind of a project. Um, but on Tuesdays, we work on a different project of mine, Noah's Archipelago, and currently working our way through the calendar months, an illustration for each. It was originally going to be a 2027 calendar, and then I decided it was going to be a book of days. So tomorrow we are, even though it's barely June, tomorrow we're drawing some trick or treating. Um, anyways, that's Miles's legs. It kind of becomes a little hard to see the difference in there. Um, just thinking these would be rosewood, so I should probably give some, just a little bit of light texture. Anyways, so so yeah, if you want to see some trick or treating cartooning, that's going to be tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. Wednesday, this week, I'm not going to be streaming on Wednesday. I've got another event to be at. Normally, we stream on Wednesdays for my project, Zommel the Destroyer. And then, actually, this is going to be kind of in shadow, right? And then on Thursdays, it's another Noah's Archipelago stream, working on coloring books. Yes, not comics, coloring based on the comics. So we will have two, possibly even three coloring pages that we will be inking on Thursday. We got 3 done last week. And the book that I'm working on Thursdays, the premise is Noah from my webcomic Noah's Archipelago is explaining to his young daughter about all the jobs he's had. So it's the A to Z of Noah's job history. And I haven't decided which jobs I'm drawing this time. I think the letters are going to be C and R. So that's coming up on Thursday, and then we're back to the rats on Friday for 2, maybe 3 more pages from a graphic novel called Ricky B Goes to Sea, which is this guy Miles, his cousin baby's boyfriend is Ricky. So Miles isn't in that book though, because the story was written before Miles is really a fully developed character. So anyways, so that's kind of the streaming schedule for the rest of the week. For anyone who might be tuning in just now and wants to catch the rest of this stream, what I do with the streams now is I save them as private initially when I finish, because then that gives YouTube time for the processing up to the final, you know, the good image quality, such as it is when it's filmed from my phone. So YouTube usually has finished that process early to mid-afternoon. So I will at that point make it public again. So if you're, and that's kind of for all of my streams, if you're tuning in on something and going, where's that stream I saw last night? Well, it's probably still being processed. So it'll, check back later. I always, by the next evening anyways, at the latest, it'll be made public again. So there's Miles with very, very bad xylophone technique. But let's have one more look at both of the drawings from tonight. We will end a little bit early, but unfortunately, I don't have anything Miles related to finish up. So, in the last half hour. So, we are just going to have a look at this. So, again, this is a couple drawings based on X. Next week, we'll have a couple based on Y and then Z, and then we're going to start working on a different project that features both Ricky and Miles for, I don't know, probably a couple months, I'm guessing. But anyway, so we've got Miles. He's looking kind of pissed off. I will say, I think I had previously said that when I got to Z, I was going to go back and some of the drawings I was going to redraw. That will happen, but it'll be later. I'll kind of do a phase 2 of this project after I've written the short stories, because then I'll know what other illustrations I want for the book. And anything that needs to be redrawn, we will redraw it at that point. So that'll be sometime in the fall, I guess. Anyway, so for X, Miles wearing X-ray specs, and you can tell by the expression he's not impressed with them. I'm envisioning, because Miles is 28, this is a pair that he had as a youngster, and he's found them and remembered all over again how pissed off he was that he'd wasted his allowance on this. And I may add more shading in his face and neck and whatnot. I'm not totally sure, because I don't think I've usually done that in other large drawings of Miles, so I kind of want to keep it somewhat consistent through the book. So there's Miles and his X-ray specs, and then Miles wailing away on his xylophone using the technique of a taiko drummer. Anyways, so that's going to be it for tonight's stream. Thank you all for popping in, especially anyone who was patient and came through the whole thing. Like I said, this stream will be public again tomorrow afternoon after it's done processing. And we will see you, well, for Miles, we'll see you again next Monday. But for other characters, we'll see you tomorrow for Noah, and Thursday for Noah, and Friday for Ricky. So thank you for watching. We'll see you again real soon. Bye for now, and bye-bye, Miles. Be nice to that xylophone. It probably cost $5,000. Anyways, good night.